Hey, everybody. As we get close to Resurrection Sunday, I wanted to discuss something that I learned recently in the past month, something that I didn't realize earlier, but I think is very appropriate for us to discuss right now. I was at church and was listening to the sermon that the pastor was preaching, and he was preaching from the scripture of Matthew 26, verse 39, where it says, going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. Now, obviously, we're celebrating Resurrection Day this Sunday, so we know that Jesus was crucified, he was buried, and he rose again. And even in Philippians 2:8 says, and being found in apparent as a man, he humbled himself to become obedient to death, even the death of the cross. Now, if you put those two scriptures together, where Matthew 26:39, Jesus asked, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. I just realized that God told Jesus no. And that was a shock to my system because in other times when Jesus prayed, God acted affirmatively. Jesus prayed to heal a deaf man, and he was able to hear. Jesus prayed, and a blind man was able to see. Jesus prayed, and a deaf man was able to hear, lame was able to talk, and all these various things. But in this particular time, Jesus prayed, and God said no. And God didn't say no just to be mean. He didn't say no just because he didn't have anything better to do. He didn't say no because he just wanted to say no. God told Jesus no because he knew what was best. He told Jesus no because Jesus had an assignment. Jesus' assignment was to save the world. Jesus' assignment was to save the world from his own sin. And only Jesus could fulfill this assignment. So God told Jesus no. And it's real important that we understand that even in our daily lives, we have assignments too. We have things that God has called us to do. As a child of God, he has given us various assignments. And the thing is, when he gives you assignment, there's some places you can't go. When God gives you an assignment, there's some people you can't associate yourself with. When God gives you an assignment, there's some things you can't do. So my question to you becomes, what do you do when God says no? Because there's always stuff that we want and we want to have or we want to do, but it's not always in our best interest. And God knows what's best for us. So sometimes he has to say no. Now, one of the things that I appreciate about the scripture of Matthew 26 is Jesus' response after he asked the question. In some respects, I feel as though the gospel writer missed something. Because if you look at how Jesus phrased it, he said, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. But the next very sentence, he says, not as I will, but as you will. Now, in my opinion, or in my imagination, I could hear that God responded to Jesus' question within that scripture, within that verse. And it's interesting because he quickly said that, not as I will. And even that part, let me translate that third part where Jesus says, not as I will, but as you will. So if I'm going through how I see Matthew 28:39, Jesus says, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from him. And God says, no, my son, you have an assignment that you could only fulfill. Now, where Jesus says, yet not as I will, I interpret it, he says, okay. He asked, the Father answered, and Jesus' response was, okay, let's get this done. I'm going to do what I was called to do. And that's the same thing we need to do. We need to understand that God calls us to assignments that we need to fulfill. God calls us to things that we need to do. It's interesting, whenever God gives me an assignment, I usually have three emotions. Emotion number one is excitement. I'm happy that God called me to do something. I'm happy that I could do whatever God needs me to do, whatever capacity. And I get excited and I get worked up and I start preparing for what he wants me to do. The next emotion becomes doubt and worry. because once I'm involved in what he's asking me to do, I realize this is bigger than me. I realize it's something that I can't really do on my own. I realize it's something I wonder, why would they listen to me, or why would they pay attention to something I would say? So that doubt creeps in. But then the third emotion becomes reassurance or worry free, because I realize if it's something too big for me, it's not too big for God. And all I have to do is show up and do my part, and he'll do the rest. There's an old song that I used to love back in church where it says, if just one step, if I make just one step, he will do the rest. And that's true in our assignments. All we have to do is take the first step in what God is calling us to do, and he'll do the rest. And I encourage you to pray for your assignment, work on your assignment, and when God tells you no, you do like Jesus say, okay, and let's do this. That's all I have for now. Until next time, God bless.